Hey, and welcome to the Lichen Sclerosus podcast. My name is Kathy, and this is our journal of learning about and living with lichen sclerosus. Each week, I usually research a topic on lichen sclerosus, and I bring you back the information and tell you how it's affected my life. But this week, I have my very first interview, and I'm so excited because it's with a brave lichen sclerosus sister. Her name is Dr. Sanaz Yaghmai. She is a trauma-informed coach, a yoga teacher, and a birth doula who was formerly a psychologist. She's been in the mental health field for the last 10 years. She had so much insightful information to share that I had to break our interview into two parts. So this week, we'll hear about her diagnosis story. And I'm telling you, it's a doozy. We had tears, we had laughter. I think you're going to really feel the love because I know I did. Her personal experience with trauma recovery through yoga and empowerment coaching redirected her career path. Today, she is the founder of Alchemy of Trauma, which is a trauma-informed practice centered around coaching for resilience building and women's reproductive health. And she has so much knowledge that she shared with us, and she was so vulnerable. We talked about sex, we talked about relationships, and of course, we talked about doctors. And definitely come back next week because we're going to talk about how trauma informs our lichen sclerosus and how lichen sclerosus informs our trauma. It is going to get deep, and I know you're going to learn a lot, and I just cannot wait. So without further ado, here's my interview with Dr. Sanaz. Hello, thank you for joining me, Dr. Sanaz. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge, sharing your story, and just being open to be here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate giving me this opportunity.
So let's get into your lichen sclerosus story. How old were you when you first started noticing symptoms?
I was probably 26, 27 when I started noticing mild symptoms. So I should just say I'm 37 years old right now, basically 10 years ago. At that point, it was very mild to the point where all I had was a mild pain upon penetration. So right in the very beginning, it would be a little bit painful. I always honestly thought, oh, it's just my body's small. It's really tight. I never really thought anything of it. I just thought, okay, it's going to hurt for a couple of seconds and then it'll be okay. That was my experience. Although it wasn't like that when I first started having sex a few years prior to that. So it kind of progressed. So I did notice that something had changed because I didn't have pain before, but I still didn't think much of it.
Isn't that funny how we make excuses?
I know, right?
Because I did the same thing. I noticed a difference, but I was just like, oh, okay, well, I'll just work through it, and not realizing that I was causing myself trauma. You know what I mean? Because
exactly.
My body recognizes, okay, this hurts. And I'm saying, no, it's okay. We'll be fine. And then when you go back again, your body is just like, I don't want to do that. And you're like, yeah, we'll be fine.
Word for word, exactly. I've had this conversation with myself so many times after the fact.
Right.
After I've had painful sex and I look at myself and I'm like, okay, why did I do that? And what's going on? And it's really a mind-body disconnect that we continue to feed into every time we have sex.
Yes.
And this is what I tell my clients often is those living with lichen sclerosus or any other vulvar pain condition, we're honestly navigating the world of pleasure, sex, intimacy, birth even through a neurophysiological lens of trauma.
Yes.
And that means exactly like it fits into what you just said, is there's this mind-body disconnect because our body feels mild pain, sometimes intense pain. For me, it started off mild and it became horrible. And even when it gets worse, you still do it because you want to have sex.
Yes.
You want to be intimate with your partner. It's just this natural, innate human desire. You're a sexual being. And
it's a need. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful experience that you want to have with your partner. And yet you're going to experience this pain.
Right.
And you just tell yourself, it's okay, I'll make it through. And, after a few seconds or maybe a couple minutes, it'll go away.
Right.
Because once you're in the heat of it, like, even if it's there, sometimes you allow yourself to disconnect from that pain.
Yeah.
And I know for sure I've done that.
Yeah. I've even gotten to the point where I was just like, maybe I'll try to enjoy the pain. Like, maybe I'll find the pleasure in the pain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just to kind of get through it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And then you tell yourself, okay, this pain isn't as bad as it was last time.
Right.
So it's bearable or it's getting better. You tell yourself these things because you want to have sex.
Right.
And then while you're having sex in that moment and you're experiencing pain, that is trauma to the body.
Right.
And we keep doing it over and over and over again. It's such a mind game,
Yes.
That's how it leads to feelings of inadequacy, worthlessness, shame, and most importantly, I feel like what I've heard a lot is anger. There's a lot of anger and even sadness towards your body. Like, why am I like this? Why me? Or why does it hurt? And then you end up ignoring the pain, but having the sex, and it's not even enjoyable sex anymore. And then it impacts the relationship you have with your partner. And, it's just this vicious cycle.
Absolutely. So going back to you, so you were having just a little bit of pain when you were having sex, and then what happened?
So I was having a little bit of pain, and then at the age of 28, I met a guy who ultimately became my husband. So I was 28, we started dating. I guess a few months in, the pain was there. I had painful sex up until that point a few times, and I didn't think much of it. And then while I was with him, we were dating for almost 2 years, the pain progressively got worse. I should say that it wasn't the pain that got worse at the first, it was more the healing time for the wound. Because at first the pain would just, it would just be pain. And then over time, that pain turned into, it would tear my skin. And then I would bleed, but it was very, very little. It was a few drops of blood, after the fact I would notice. Mm-hmm. And it would take a couple of days to heal. So we wouldn't be able to have sex. We would have sex one day and then we couldn't have sex until 2-3 days later. And then over time, in those 2 years, it just took longer for my body to heal. We would have to have longer breaks in between each time we had sex. I want to also point out that while I was in this relationship, while going through this whole pain and sex issue, I was also experiencing this uncertainty around the relationship I was in. I kept questioning whether or not I should be in this relationship. But we were talking about marriage, we were talking about getting serious, moving in together, blah, blah, blah. And it's something I had really wanted and I had dreamed of. Mm. And I had told myself that by 30 years old, I will be married. I just felt like, this is it. He's the one. I see the potential. So let's just work through it. So I was also choosing to not listen to my intuition. And in hindsight, 10 years later, I truly believe that there was these parallels between my mind and my heart and what I was experiencing interpersonally falls very much in line with how my lichen sclerosus got worse. I feel like as my disconnect between my mind and my intuition, my heart and my intuition grew, and I was telling myself I should get out of this, but I didn't want to because I wanted to get married, paired with the same timing of how my lichen sclerosus pain got worse. I mean, at that point, I didn't know it was lichen sclerosus, but how my pain during sex got worse. And then my bleeding got worse. My tears would never heal. There was such a strong parallel now that I see that it's really fascinating for me to look back on.
So your body was physically manifesting
Exactly.
what your intuition
Was
was kind of
telling
trying
me.
to tell you, but your brain was trying to
My brain was
ignore
trying to
both of
fight it
them.
all. Exactly. My brain
Yeah.
was fighting it all, saying,
Wow.
no, you're going to get married. He's a great guy. Like, don't listen to your intuition. Like, just I was mistaking my intuition as like fear for like in commitment, or I don't know. I was trying to
Right,
make
right.
myself excuses for why I'm having these gut feelings.
Oh yeah, all those things society tells us. Oh,
Yeah,
you need to get married by such and such time. Oh, you need
exactly.
to have children by such and such time.
Exactly.
Your body's saying, this is not the relationship for you. And your mind is saying, well, this is the one I have. And
Exactly.
he's good enough. He's
Yes.
fine.
Yes.
I
Yes.
get it.
You hit the nail on the head. Exactly. So 2 years into the relationship, we got married. And then a few months after the wedding, we started talking about divorce. Yeah. So we started talking about divorce and then tried couples therapy and, tried to make it work.
Sorry, personal question.
This is all personal. It's all good.
I know, but this is I'm real personal. Did the sex have anything to do with the breakdown
Oh,
in the relationship?
yeah, a lot of people have asked me that. I personally don't think so, but you'd have to ask him that. But honestly, I don't think so.
Yeah.
We had this like understanding. He was very, very patient, very respectful of my issue. And, he tried his best not to make it an issue for me. If anybody was making an issue, it was myself. I was like annoyed at myself or at my body. He was very understanding and patient. And I don't think it was that. But, we'd have to ask him as well. Basically, we were heading down the path of divorce by 6 months in, I would say. And then one night we were together and we were talking about divorce. And it was kind of like we had this agreement that, okay, it's going to happen. We're going to go through with beginning the filing of the paperwork process. And so we had that conversation. It was very sad and emotional and just very difficult. But we both agreed that it's the right thing for us to do. And that same night, we had sex. And we both knew, at least I did, that, okay, this is most likely going to be the last time we ever have sex.
That breakup sex be good.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I was thinking too. I'm like, okay, fine, one more time, this is going to be great. And
Right.
we had this really like wonderful like conversation about, that we're going to end this. And
Yeah,
we're both
that
being
deep talk. You
adults.
were on the
Yeah.
same page.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So I
You're
was
like, look, I'm gonna get it one more time.
one more time. And so we start to, have sex, and I cannot even begin to describe the amount of pain I had that day. Till this day, I have never in my life experienced that much pain ever. Period. Fuck, I don't want to get emotional. So sorry.
No, feel it. I get it.
Okay, so whenever I think about it, that's when I know that it was incredibly traumatizing. It's because I feel all of this that I'm feeling right now. Like those emotions come up. And
Yes.
like the best way for me to describe it, I mean, since we're getting all, personal here, is I always describe that moment where he went inside as a feeling of this double-edged sword just slicing me open. Like that's it. And so when it happened, he went in. I felt the pain, and it literally took my breath away. And then he saw it in my face, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And then I said, "No." And I usually say, "It's okay. Let's just wait a minute. Okay, now, continue." He knows how to work with my body. But this time I said, "No, I'm not okay." And like he pulls out, and then I just start bawling, crying. And I wasn't expecting to cry either. I really wasn't. It wasn't. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but like you just I just burst with emotions. And I thought it was,
Yes.
I thought he was going to pull out and we're going to just pause, take a break, and continue. But this burst of emotions like washed over me, and I broke down crying. And the crying was more for, I, I felt like I wasn't crying because of the pain, but I was crying because what I had chosen to put my body through. I was
Yes.
that,
I've been there.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So,
I get it.
yeah. When I realized that, because I noticed it in the moment while I was crying, I realized, Sanaz, why are you doing this? You've been going through this for so long. Like, you know, something is wrong here. Like, we need to get this checked. And, that was my turning point for me. And it was also the realization I need to not be with him. And, I need to not, why am I having sex with him again? Why am I doing this to my body? Like we had decided from months ago, we're going to get a divorce. Why am I continuing to allow him into my life, allow him into my physical space? So, you know how you keep coming back to these unhealthy relationships? You have this pull, right? And so that moment when we were having sex was my wake up call and made me realize I just need to completely step away from this whole relationship. So that was my turning point for the lichen sclerosus, where I realized, okay, something is clearly wrong. And that's when I started sharing my story with doctors. Up until then, I really hadn't told doctors the depths of my problem. I wouldn't tell them the true story of my experiences. And that, I think, is tied in with shame as well. Shame and denial.
That this is 4 years after you started having the pains?
Yeah, I started talking to the doctors at 31, I would say. But when I was 30, when I was with him and before the divorce, I had talked to a doctor about it, and it was more kind of like brushed off as, just lubrication issues, which I believed, but, I thought, okay, maybe that's it.
Of course you believe. We all believe the doctors when they tell us,
Oh, yeah, all of that
oh
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you need to change your detergent. Oh no. So you went back to the doctor, started sharing more.
I started sharing more, and honestly, that doctor was one out of 6 other doctors that I went to over the course of the next 6-7 years. It's basically till now. The doctors have told me various things. The first one that I was seeing when I was with my husband, she said to try estrogen cream. And so she gave me an estrogen cream to try, and it didn't work. And then other doctors had said it's a yeast infection. And at that point, I never had any itching or burning sensations. I had just the pain during sex. And while it was healing, it would be a little itchy. But once it would heal, it would go away. And so I would explain this, but the doctors said, oh, this is just a yeast infection. And they would give me creams. I honestly never once used the yeast infection creams because deep down inside, I knew it wasn't a yeast infection. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I could have used them. Maybe they would have helped temporarily. I don't know. But so many doctors told me it's a yeast infection.
I've never heard of yeast infections causing pain during sex.
Well, they would say like, oh, my skin is thin. And then I tell them that I had the itching as well. So the thin skin and the itching, I don't know. It seems to be like the first thing they prescribe is yeast infection creams.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in LA at the time, and I looked up the best gynecologists in LA. Fortunately, I've always had the privilege of being financially able to go to any doctor I want. Granted, it's cost me like thousands of dollars, but I wanted to figure this out. I can't even tell you the things that doctors would tell me. One doctor said that I am having sex with men with big penises and that I should find men with smaller penises.
Oh my God.
I cannot begin to explain how furious I was when he said that, but I didn't even say anything to him in the moment. Why? Because he was examining me while he is telling me this.
That's crazy.
I know. Till this day, I always think back to that doctor, and I get so upset at myself, for not speaking up and not saying anything. It's just such disrespect and lack of compassion.
And this is why I always say doctors have no idea of how they set us back, because they say these things without really thinking about it. And then they cause us to be angry, frustrated. They can cause shame.
Yeah.
And then we don't want to go back. Who wants to go back to that?
Yeah, of course not.
It's another trauma.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You're going to this person for help, and they're giving you the opposite of help.
And then to top it off, the language they use even can be so minimizing. Like,
Yes.
they're invalidating your experiences.
Yes.
Like, for example, what he said, like, I'm just having sex with guys who have big penises. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. That's not it. You know, a baby's supposed to come out of this vagina. Like,
Right.
why would it tear
Right.
if it's a size issue, you know?
Yeah. That makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
It's a one size fits all place. Okay?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. It should be, right?
Yes.
So, well, that was one doctor, but another doctor said he wants to do a biopsy.
Oh.
And I was torn over that. I did some research into it, but at that time, granted, I didn't know it was lichen sclerosus, so I wasn't researching lichen sclerosus and biopsies. I was just, I don't know, Googling other stuff, basically.
Right.
And I was torn, but I ended up doing it, and I really feel that that biopsy made things 10 times worse. Well, first of all, when he was doing it, he ended up giving me 3 stitches because the blood wouldn't stop when he took the piece of skin. They normally cover it up with some solution that stops the bleeding, but he said the solution wasn't helping and that he needs to give me 3 stitches. That, again, was another very traumatizing experience because I was not planning on going in there to have 3 stitches down there. And so while he's down there doing the biopsy, he says, oh, I have to give you stitches right now. I'm going to give you 2 injections. And he gave me actually 3 injections in different sites, and then starts stitching me up. And that was so painful and traumatizing. And then that wound took over 4 months to heal.
Oh my goodness.
And that's when I realized that that biopsy just made it worse because, you know, I would have a few days of healing before from a small tear during sex. And now he gave me 3 stitches and it's not even healing after 3 months. And it wasn't healing to the point where if you would touch it, it would tear again. The stitches, it would just tear open.
So the biopsy took 4 months to heal.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it took a long time. And
I mean, what did they say when you told them it's not healing?
Yeah, so this is what I wanted to say because we were talking about how some things that the doctors say, you know, they stay with you forever and they don't even realize the impact of their words.
Absolutely.
So this doctor, I went back to him after, at that point it was 3 months, and he saw that it wasn't healing. And again, he touched it and it again tore open 3 months later, just from a really gentle touch. Like, I was amazed at the fact that it actually tore. And he stops, puts his things away and tells me, you know, I can sit back up. And he's like, you know, I really don't know what to say, but I think you can still have children. You're just not going to be able to conceive the traditional way, and you may have to do artificial insemination. And then he says that as he's walking out of the room. And that was his goodbye to me. And so what does that message say? That message says, I don't think you can ever have a penis inside of you again. And he knew, aside from obvious need of wanting to have sex, I wanted children too, you know? So an additional reason as to why I want to be in a relationship and have sex and all that stuff is because I want children.
Right.
And he just literally said, you know, I don't know what to say and blah, blah, blah. That's what he said, walking out of the room, and said, you know, good luck, and leaves the room saying that. And I was literally, again, blown away by the fact that he said that to me. Again, broke down crying. I think I cried on my way home, and so never went back to him either.
Wow. I don't blame you. Wow.
Yeah.
So insensitive.
Right? Yeah. And this was before I was diagnosed with lichen sclerosus. And this was basically another doctor saying, I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry. I can't help you. And I understand that they're frustrated. And I don't mean to be bashing on doctors.
Yeah, but don't stop looking. Yeah, if you don't know, then you know what? Maybe you need to
Yeah.
see a specialist, or you need to see someone that has more knowledge than I do. You know what I mean? Don't stop looking.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I kept doing. And so I went from him to somebody else and I started doing more research. And I literally diagnosed myself and found lichen sclerosus. And I was like, oh my God, I think I have lichen sclerosus. I really think this is it. So then I looked up doctors who specialize in lichen sclerosus. I found two in LA and I went to them and it was better because they understood what I was going through. But then again, for those who are listening, I'm sure they know, like, there is really no solution for lichen sclerosus. And different doctors will say different things, but at least the fact that they understood and knew what it was a huge burden lifted off of my shoulders. The fact that they agreed with me that, yes, this is lichen sclerosus, and I was able to give it a name was huge for me. Like, I was excited to tell my family, I know what it is now. And then they're like, okay, great. Now how do you treat it? I'm like, you can't treat it, but that doesn't matter. I just know what it is. Like, the fact that I was able to give it a name was exciting for me, even though I still knew I don't know how to treat it.
I had that push and pull as well when I got my diagnosis. Okay, yes, it has a name. Now I know what it is.
Yeah.
Because she didn't tell me hardly anything. I had to ask questions. And then I'm like, okay, well, how do we cure it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, there's no cure. And then it was like my stomach dropped, like the devastation of, are you telling me I have to live with this for the rest of my life? So I get that push and pull, that
Yeah.
that joy, and then that feeling of dread.
Of like, yeah, exactly. Dread.
And then the elation comes back that you're like, okay, I'll deal with it, but I'm
Yeah.
happy. I know what it is
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And because now that you have a name for it, now you can look for other people who have it. And that's where the community support comes in, where I think is so crucial. Because once you're in that community of women who have been diagnosed with lichen sclerosus, to be able to share and just talk about these experiences that we're talking about, like, that alone is healing in and of itself, because it really alleviates some of the burden to be able to share your struggles with others. And especially something like this, which is so intimate and also tied in with so much body image shame, it can be devastating on one's like mind and body.
Or you can do the opposite, like I did. I got my diagnosis, and then I got my cream, and then I tried to go on as life as normal, because she didn't tell me anything really about it. So I was just thinking, okay, I used my cream and I won't be itchy. I tried to live like I was normal
again.
You know what I mean?
Like you figured it out.
Yes, like I was normal. Like I could just ignore it, because as long as I used my cream, I was good. I could feel normal. But underneath, in hindsight, I wasn't normal. I was subconsciously dealing with all those issues of shame and pulling away from my husband, because my self-esteem had gone down, and I didn't realize I quit working out, and I started gaining weight and stopped dressing up, and just slowly kind of regressed.
Yeah.
To the point where I didn't recognize it. And it's so slow that you don't even realize it's happening until something wakes you up. Like you have that moment where you said, I'm not supposed to be in this relationship.
Yeah.
When you get that awakening and you look at yourself and you're like, whoa, how did I get here? And then you look back and you're like, okay, something's got to change.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then that is when I went looking for community.
Yeah.
And I wish I had looked for it sooner, because I think I would be in a much healthier place, and I wouldn't have as much work as I do now,
Yeah.
But also, again, I blame the doctors.
Yeah.
Because I think what's most important is when we get these diagnoses, I think it should be a requirement that they make us go and talk to a counselor or a therapist, even if it's just one session of somebody who's trained to to work with patients who have gotten
Right.
a chronic disease, because it changes your
Yeah.
thinking. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So I think it's definitely should be something that should be required.
Yeah, I think a lot of doctors just don't know too much about lichen sclerosus. Based on my experience, they're either really well versed in it and this is their area of expertise, and those are the ones who are, putting the research out there and really speaking up and raising awareness, and I'm so grateful for all of those doctors.
Yes, me too. Yes.
The ones that don't know, because they don't know what to say to their patients. And I feel like those doctors need to communicate with each other better and find ways to create some sort of like a seamless transition from when they get a patient like us, they can, either refer them to those communities that those doctors have created, the other doctors, just some sort of a transition, like you're saying, like, because they don't know, instead of just saying, sorry, here's some yeast infection cream and go figure it out, just refer you to support groups or different doctors.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, like in the end, it's in our hands and we have to take control over our health and find ways, and we have to do the research and we have to find the doctors. And if we leave it up to somebody else to like pave the way for our path to healing, it's just going to take that much longer. I feel like when we take it in our own hands and reach out to the communities, reach out to the doctors, it adds a sense of empowerment as well, because you see that, you're doing this for yourself, and it keeps you motivated to take that next step forward.
And when we're sharing our stories like we are today, hopefully a doctor will hear this, or somebody will share with their doctor and may share their story, and they may change their mind.
Yeah.
Or, even if it's not just with lichen sclerosus, like I said, it's any chronic disease, that they understand there is a further level of care that is needed.
Yeah.
Because like you just said, they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And if we don't tell them what we need, they're never going to know.
Yeah.
So I don't want to blame them as well.
Yeah.
It's a training issue.
Yeah.
But it's also, we have to come out from the shadows.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't just complain and not say anything. We have to use our voices, and we have to make our issues heard in order for there to be change.
Yeah. And like you said, they don't know what they don't know. If we're not telling them that this is impacting our emotional, mental health,
yes,
then they don't know that. They don't realize how much it's impacting our sex life, our dating life, our self-worth, our body image issues. And if we don't tell these doctors that, they're not going to know. They're going to think, okay, we've figured out a way to live with it, so we're okay.
Exactly.
So we have to, as women who are speaking up about it, I think one of the things is we have to talk about it more and more to destigmatize all of the feelings, all of the mental and emotional health issues that come with lichen sclerosus needs to be more normalized. And the more we can normalize the fact that there's a lot of serious mental health struggles that come with it, then more and more women will start talking about it and saying, yes, me too, I have this and it's impacting me. And maybe I can speak to somebody to lower my levels of stress. And I think you talked about this in one of your podcasts. Given the fact that lichen sclerosus is an autoimmune condition, stress exacerbates things and causes flare-ups.
Huge trigger.
Right? And
yes.
Anybody who has lichen sclerosus knows this.
Yes.
And that when we have stress, it causes our symptoms to flare up. And so it's this vicious cycle. We're feeling the stress and shame and guilt and anger towards our vulvas.
Yes.
And then it's just feeding into the symptoms and worsening them. So if we can find ways to calm the body, calm the mind, approach ourself and our self-worth with compassion and gentle awareness rather than anger, I really think it'll shift the way our body reacts, and our stress levels will slowly go down. And hopefully, I'm not a doctor, like a medical doctor to say this, but hopefully it'll minimize and reduce flare-ups. And the flare-ups won't be as bad as they were when we're really stressed.
Exactly. I think that's the perfect sentiment for us to end with this week. Thank you, Dr. Sanaz, for joining me. And don't forget to come back next week to hear the rest of our conversation, where we discuss how trauma informs our lichen sclerosus and how our lichen sclerosus informs our trauma. You can find Dr. Sanaz on Instagram at the handle Dr.Yaghmai, Yaghmai. And if you want to work with her, check out her website at www.alchemyoftrauma.com. I'll have her link in the show notes in your podcatcher, or you can go onto the website at lichensclerosuspodcast.com and find it there. She is working with Lichen Sclerosus sisters, and when you come back next week, you will hear all about her practice and what that can do for you. Be safe, have an amazing week, and don't forget to come back next week for the rest of our conversation. Bye.